to the observatory near Tucson, Arizona. Mike Peterson logged the time with his eyes the size of 2 Kennedy silver dollars. On an enormous wall computer, connected to the satellite dish outside, a long needle, curved so that the point would touch a huge roll of graph paper, suddenly moved, and as the paper crept along, the needle left its mark, vividly in bright red ink. "Wow," Mike said. Mike's partner Pat would soon join him for their shift. Out at the side entrance to Los Alamos, Patrick Carlson slid his magnetic ID card into a reader and his index finger into a slot next to it on the same machine, near the door. "I don't see you again," the card reader, voice-activated robot voice said to verify Pat was the same man whose fingerprints were Pat's and the card holder were one and the same. Pausing before he entered the laboratory for his mundane shift, Pat lit a filterless Camel cigarette, and under a canopy of stars above him, before sunrise, he had a smoke before entering work. Under the magnetic identification reader, there was an ashtray by a cushioned iron-framed chair and a potted plant just outside the side entrance to Los Alamos. Patrick Carlson's thoughts always drifted back to the home fires burning on the home front. He was a very concerned parent and spouse. Patrick's wife Liz often slept alone, however, and his young daughters often missed him. And that's primarily because Pat sang in a rare earth outlaw country cover band, and he played gigs almost every Wednesday through Sunday night. Those gigs could start anywhere around 9 p.m. and go all the way to 3 a.m. Add to that his shift at SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence at Los Alamos, and Pat wasn't home that much. This evening was no different. Pat was he was just drinking tequila in a cantina across the border in Mexico 1 hour earlier from arriving at Los Alamos with the guys in the band. That exaltation and tranquility from the tequila during and after the band set was wearing off. Pat wasn't looking forward to this shift, pretty much just like every shift. I mean, they had never received a signal, obviously, up until, well, let's see what happens tonight. Often Pat and Mike just sat there in the lab. The job defined the definition of boredom. They sat there in a room under enormous satellite dishes that stretched to the end of the mesa, waiting, listening for a signal from deep space, from an advanced civilization way out there beyond the stars, maybe millions of light years away. And who knows, there may be advanced civilizations at the bottom of the ocean, right underneath our noses. Anyway, Mike and Pat studied astronomy at Marquette University in Milwaukee. Pat did so because of his passion for stars in the sky got chicks, as Pat used to say. Mike because he was compelled, after seeing the rings of Saturn, around Saturn that is, on his 76-millimeter backyard telescope when he was just 9 years old, and then seeing the Orion constellation close up on that same 76-millimeter backyard telescope. Pat and Mike knew of one another at Marquette because they both majored in astronomy, but they really didn't socialize with one another. On Saturday nights in Milwaukee, Mike would go out into the neighborhoods on the edges of Milwaukee with his fellow Geek Squad, and they would gaze at the heavens. So Mike gazed at stars on Saturday nights. Pat saw stars sometimes after fights in the pubs on campus when he chased down the wrong girl. And that was way back in the 1980s, though, and everything had kind of settled down a little bit. Young people out of college in 2016, they want to go out to the stars. So they want to build ships, spaceships, and go out to the stars. They don't want to necessarily spend all that time in college sitting at a desk with a cup of coffee, listening for anomalies on a screen, or for a needle to erratically move, or for a bell to ding, or this or whatever. Even if that meant a sign from the heavens that mankind is not alone in space, they wanted to go out and meet the alien dude in his world. They didn't want to wait for him to come to ours. Sitting at a desk just did not inspire 22-year-olds fresh out of college, even at $35 an hour and full government benefits. But up until about 2007, genuine scientists sat at the desks and chairs that Pat and Mike sit in today. But since about 2007, grant for the operation of Los Alamos started to come in like a trickle. After the 2008 budget crisis, these grants from different corporations almost sometimes dried up completely. And there were many a fiscal year where Pat and Mike wondered if their positions would even be funded next year. So you might want to say kind of got Abbott and Costello scientists in the place of the real thing, but Mike and Pat were genuinely astronomy majors, and they knew a lot about the stars. For Mike, the job was perfect. For Pat, it was security for his wife Liz and for the kids Izzy and Rosie. And when the club wasn't so forthcoming, that is the club that his band, Pat's bands, played at. When that club wasn't so forthcoming with the band's percentage of the gate, Pat knew he had the steady job to back him up. Pat extinguished his filterless Camel cigarette. He entered the main lab next to an enormous telescope. Pat expected Mike to say, "Hey, how you doing? Good morning," whatever. And instead, Mike rushed up to Pat and showed him a printout of the Wow Signal. "Dude," Mike said to Pat, "came without a warning. Must be a sign on the roof." Pat's tequila was still fogging his brain, but in true Pat form, he rose to the occasion. "No kidding," Pat said. "I got General Blankenship on the line. He'll..." Pat stood by the dial set on the landline phone and clicked it dead. "Wait a minute," Pat said. "We bring in the old man on this, and it's a mistake. He'll fire us. Remember the last time he came by unexpected and caught us having a beverage? It took all the talking in the world to keep our jobs. So you just sit there with your information here and just relax." All right, I remember," Mike said. "But I double-checked all the readings. It seems this Wow signal, if that's what we're going to call it, is coming from galaxy MAC SWEEN 0647-JD. "Is that what we're calling it?" Pat said. "The Wow signal. All right, that's memorable." Pat inspected the signal on the graph as well. Suddenly, filled with a sort of confidence that like a light bulb went off over Pat's head, Pat said, "Let me reply." Mike looked at him nonplussed. "What? The signal comes from 13.3 billion light years away, dude. That's about the age of the universe. It would take that long for them to get our reply." "Unless this signal's coming from Linda with a Y. She lives on the Indian reservation next door to Los Alamos." And Pat picked up the microphone and said, "Okay, Linda, I'm on to you, babe. You don't fool me." "Dude," Mike said, "your message is going to be documented and archived by the FCC, the FAA, NASA." "Listen, Linda, I don't know who you think you are. I'm going to call you on this. You can't get in a lot of trouble for this, Toots. This is official business your old man Pat's doing. And you may think you pulled one over on me, but you didn't." The graph completely returned to normal. It seemed as if Pat's words were working. "See, I told you it was Linda. I just seen her at the crowd at the gig I just did. She's trying to make me jealous by baking out with a biker dude in front of me. Yeah, she ain't over me. She knows where I work, and she's just trying to get even with me. Well, Pat Carlson don't get blackmailed. No one railroads Patrick Carlson." And Pat grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I took advantage of you. You were of age. I loved you, and I left you. You consented. End of story. You don't mess with me, I don't mess with you. You want to mess with me, I'll mess with you." Pat took a deep sip of coffee Mike had made for them both and sat down. Then the signal beeped again. "Uh-oh. I feel our lives won't be the same anymore," Mike said. Pat heard Mike, but he refused that scenario. He urgently grabbed the microphone. "Okay, it's not Linda, it's Sarah. Hi, Sarah. You think you're going to get one past old Pat Carlson? Not on your life. Not today, honey." Suddenly, the beeping stopped. "You sure that's 13.3 billion light years away?" "Yes." "Well, they don't use this stuff to contact us anyway. It's all done via telepathy. Anything else is bogus." And then suddenly, a thought entered Pat and Mike's brains. And their minds, an image crept in. An image of a steak, if they were hungry. Same sort of scenario. But in this case, the thought was, go out onto the roof of Los Alamos and look up. A UFO, the size of a Walmart, floated above them in the early morning Arizona haze. Both Pat and Mike understood. For the operator. And then suddenly, Mike felt as if the entire laboratory was made out of rubber, and it would bend if necessary. Mike wanted to push on the walls of the roof and watch it bend. Wow, Mike uttered. Suddenly, a beam of light shot Pat. He turned to Mike and said, "Karimi Kel." Pat said mechanically, bathed in white light. And then mechanically, Pat took filterless Camel out of his vest pocket, and he lit it up, and he smoked it vigorously until he coughed. Karimi Kaha Lama, Pat said. Mike said, "I never heard you cough from smoking before." But the beam of light did not yet strike Mike, or had not struck Mike. Mechanically, Pat left the rooftop deck at Los Alamos. Mike still stared directly up at the floating, we'll call it a floating Walmart, perplexed and awestruck, but it was the size of a disc and it was glowing. Meanwhile, Pat marched to the fridge in the Los Alamos kitchen. He took out a Coke, cracked it open, and drank it down vigorously. Pat then returned to the rooftop. He looked up at the disc and said, "Karime," and he walked off the roof again. Suddenly, a beam of light struck Mike, and he was zipped up aboard the craft and disappeared. And then the ship disappeared. It is now 3 days later. Patrick Carlson reappears at the same time, about 4:10 in the morning, on the same rooftop at Los Alamos. No scientist has been hired in Pat and Mike's absence since they went missing, so the shift was unmanned. But Patrick Carlson's cards still allowed him access to the building, and there was usually not a single soul there at that time in the morning. Pat went to the roof and looked up. "Karime," he said. In the 4:15 a.m.-ish haze, the same ship that looked like the size of a Walmart, a floating disc, returned and hung over Los Alamos. Suddenly, Mike reappeared and stood next to Pat on the rooftop. And Mike had 3 days' worth of a beard on his face. Then, both Pat and Mike had the beams of light switched off on their bodies. And Pat and Mike looked at each other, and they jumped up and down. "Oh, what happened to you? Why do you have a beard? Did that much time pass? Where were you?" Pat said, "I went swimming at Lake Arrowhead. I kept going up to women and kissing them. I smoked a bunch of cigars." "Where'd you go?" "Dude, I went to MAC SWEEN 0647-JD. It's unbelievable. It's like a paradise. I read a blue book they had. It's the equivalent of like a Bible, but it's only 12 pages long. Dude, I memorized it without them knowing. I can rewrite the whole thing, and I'll sell 1 billion copies, maybe even 1 trillion copies." Then all of a sudden they lit up my chest and took an x-ray. Then they cut the x-ray into a circle, and they played my breathing on a turntable. "What else did you do?" "After Lake Arrowhead, I was swimming at Lake Arrowhead. I went to opening day at the Diamondbacks game. I ate like 10 hot dogs. I kissed a bunch of women until they kicked me out." Mike looked up. He stared directly at the floating disc over the rooftop at Los Alamos, and he said, "Welcome to Earth. We are an evolving, warlike race. We still use fossil fuels. About 20% of our energy comes from nuclear. But someday, we wish to explore Mars and go beyond our own solar system. We welcome you in peace." And then Pat and Mike had the following thought burned into their minds. "If we tell you the future, even for your own good, you will not understand. We just happen to be passing by your world kissing bad guys. Our message, go easy on your planet's resources. It's famous throughout the galaxy for its pretty girls and prettier scenery." No. You have to land on our White House lawn. You have to make yourselves known. Your governments are too corrupt. They have already opened relations with the Palladians from the Reticulum 3, who are also corrupt. Free energy is being hidden from your race for corrupt reasons by your governments. Therefore, we must take you back in time 3 days ago. Mike were lifted up and zoomed off. And then suddenly, 72 hours reversed, and they reappeared on the rooftop when they first had that thought in their mind, planted in their mind to look up. What are we doing out here? It's chilly out here. I don't know, dude. I might need to microdump my coffee again. I'm getting bored. This job is so dull. Yeah, I know. We never go anywhere. And suddenly Pat and Mike looked skyward before they went back inside. And from the blackness of the starry night, they both heard